Chilling tales for dark nights.
Want to make sure you never miss a Chilling Tales for Dark Nights video again? Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to turn on notifications.
Good evening, listener. You're listening to Chilling Tales for Dark Nights. I'm Otis Gyrie, host of the 5-star rated Scary Stories Told in the Dark podcast, now in its 4th season, with the 5th launching in January 2020. And tonight, I'll be your guide as we traverse the dimly lit corridors of your wildest imaginations. Today's episode is proudly brought to you by Astonishing Legends. It's a podcast with a mission to take a look at legendary, strange, and unusual events from throughout history and interview people who've had close encounters with the unexplained. Astonishing Legends is available now on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Or check out the links in the video description. Now, settle in, get cozy, and prepare to be unsettled.
It's time to turn off the lights and turn on the dark.
Chilling tales for dark nights.
All 5 of the tales in today's episode are voiced by fan favorite and host of the Horror Hill podcast, Jason Hill. In our first sinister story, a Chilling Tales for Dark Nights original written by author Seth Paul, we meet a gentleman who is concerned for the well-being of his friend who's been caught up in the latest health fad online. But this fad doesn't involve pills or diets, but rather something far more invasive. Ugh. Without further ado, I present to you At Your Command.
I think when most normal people think of the internet, they're thinking social media, online shopping, news, the occasional porn site. Now people talk about the dark web. A place of untamed wilderness where gangsters are selling guns, using Bitcoin to do untraceable transfers to build criminal enterprise. But somewhere in between, there are places that straddle that fine line between the illegal and what anyone can find with one wayward Google search. That was how I found out about Diamondback. You might think I misspelled it, but no, that's how he uses it. Or she. I just assumed it was a man, but I'm not really sure, since Diamondback uses a voice changer whenever he goes on the air. Yes, on the air. Diamondback regularly appears on weird late-night radio shows, the real late stuff, as an airing just before bakers are getting up in the morning, all about alien conspiracies and the reptilians. If you don't know about the reptilians, look them up online. There's hours of fun about them. The only reason I even know anything about Diamondback is because of a friend of mine. My friend was in a car accident a while back. She was at a red light and a teenager on a learner's permit didn't hit the brakes soon enough. While the cars were only mildly damaged in the crash, my friend got really bad whiplash and refused to see a doctor. Her mother died in a malpractice suit, and she's been leery of doctors ever since. Trouble is, now she gets chronic neck and back pain, sometimes to the point where she has to stay in bed all day. At first she just tried Tylenol, but it just dulled the pain. It never got rid of it. She turned to all sorts of holistic stuff, but that didn't do the trick either. One day, her pain was so bad she called me up crying, saying she didn't know what else to do. So I tried to be a good friend and went to look up something she hadn't come up with yet. Most of my searches ended up with either finding vitamin dealers, herbal supplements and teas, or weed dealers from states that had legalized the stuff. I was at a loss. Then, on a whim, I tried searching physical intervention. I thought maybe it would lead to some weird chiropractors or healing doctors who might work like chiropractors, but with more crystals and patchouli. Instead, a couple of clicks in, there was Diamondback. You might now be picturing a website full of dark symbology, mystic runes, weird rituals, near satanic references. Diamondback was none of these things. The whole site looked like fan fiction devoted to Star Trek, but with less comprehension. Rotating GIFs left over from the mid-90s cluttered the page like a back alley full of wooden pallets. The color scheme was all pseudo-futuristic, with a lot of metallic whites and grays. It was also hilarious. I spent the better part of a day reading over the blog postings as he rambled on about distant galaxies, contact with higher beings, and how positivity would make all of our dreams come true. Well, maybe I was a little cynical about it, but if you saw it, you might cut me a little slack. And yet, the guy had a whole team of devotees. He actually had a forum where people could talk about their own connections to a higher power. A very few of them looked like trolling posts. But the big kicker was when I read about the command. In one of his most recent posts, he talked about a method by which these higher beings could fix everything wrong with you. A code phrase. Just speak it 3 times, out loud or in your mind, and these benevolent beings will be able to gain control of your central nervous system and correct all your ills. I sent the link to my friend. I didn't send it as a joke, but I was hoping maybe, just maybe, she would read it, understand how silly her worry was, and finally see a doctor before her pain got much worse. She wrote me back a day later. "Thanks! It worked! Oh, feeling so much better!" It worked. I couldn't believe it. I had to see for myself. I drove over to see her. It was the first time in a long time I had seen her with a smile on her face. She said she hadn't slept so soundly since the accident. She wasn't quite sold necessarily that it was aliens from another galaxy that did it, but she was damn sure something fixed her. It wasn't even like the phrase itself was a self-help mantra or daily affirmation. It was just gibberish, really, but she said it was something special. I checked her Facebook page the next day and I saw an update where she had created a new group. Healing Through Command. At least 15 people had signed up for it. My jaw dropped. She was already spreading the word to other people. Hey, if it worked, more power to her, I guess. I, on the other hand, had a life to live, and I went on with business as usual. I kept checking in, though, and I saw the group was getting bigger. Almost ridiculously big. I called her once the group had reached 1,300 people. "Hey, how's it going?" "Oh, great. No more pain. I'm so glad you found that site. It's been so helpful." "I see your Facebook group is really taking off, too." The line went silent for a minute. "What Facebook group?" "You're one about healing through command." "What are you talking about? I haven't been on Facebook in months." "Well, maybe somebody hacked your account. You've got 1,300. I checked the site again. Whoa. Now almost 2,500 members. Can I call you back?" "Sure." I didn't hear from my friend for a while. I did keep checking in on Healing Through Command, and was amazed how well it seemed to be working. People by the thousands were signing up for it, and it wasn't just bot accounts. I read through people talking about how their gout went away, and how their migraines disappeared. Hell, one guy even said he didn't need a wheelchair anymore. It even melted my cynical heart a little to read about so much good being done. Months went by, and as the holidays approached, I decided to give my friend a call. She did not pick up. Weird. She always did when I called. I tried 3 more times. Still, nothing. I drove over to her place to see if maybe she was just busy feeling good, or maybe leaving her phone at home while she went out for a jog. I rang her doorbell. She didn't answer. Well, maybe she really was out for a jog. I was about to leave when I heard a crash from inside. I knocked. The door came open a little. Why would she leave it unlocked? I pushed in and called to her. "Go away!" The way she screamed it, I almost did, but I couldn't. Something was definitely wrong. The scream had come from her kitchen. I went in to find her there. She was holding a knife, and it was covered in blood. On the floor was a body. I recognized it. Her ex-boyfriend, Sam. He had stopped seeing her when her neck pain had gotten worse. I'm not sure if she had tried to patch things up or he did, but by the wound in his neck, it had not gone well. She looked up at me. "I told you, I don't have much time. Every day they have me a little more and more." "What? Who are you talking about?" But suddenly, her eyes glazed over. Her mouth forced itself into a smile. She lifted the knife and pointed it at me, but it was slow, shaking, like she was fighting some irresistible, invisible force. "Why, hello. Good to see you. I'm afraid I'm busy right now. You should go." Her head ticked back and forth like a clockwork figure. It reminded me of the robot from the Great Mouse Detective movie, a wobbly, unsteady thing that tried to imitate life, but wasn't truly alive. That was when she moved to stab me. I raised an arm to defend myself, and I just managed to deflect it away, but she was fast, and she immediately went to do it again. I grabbed her wrist. It didn't do much good. She was unusually strong all of a sudden. And then, her mouth dropped its smile, while the rest of her continued to push the knife closer and closer. "You have to do it. I've tried. They won't let me harm myself." It took me a moment to realize what she meant. To this day, I still cannot completely forgive myself for what I did, even though I still try to tell myself it was the right thing to do. I twisted the knife, using the unusual strength against her, forced the knife into her own heart. I sat in her kitchen, both bodies on the floor. I know I cried for a while and then called the police. I assumed they wouldn't believe me, but I really didn't care at the time. I then looked around her home. I needed something, anything, to explain what had happened. I found it in her basement. Set up in the middle of the open, unfinished space was a door frame. It looked just like she was installing a new room in there, but the frame wasn't attached to anything. No walls, no hinges, just a frame with empty space. The only thing out of place about it was an electronics box attached to one side with a keypad attached to it. But instead of letters and numbers, the keys were blank. I checked her bedroom. I found papers she'd shoved under her bed. Most of them were pieces of notepaper with symbols drawn on them. Some others were detailed drawings of the door I had found in the basement. There was also an electrical diagram, but I had no idea what it meant. I'm not an electrician, but even I know some of the stuff on there wasn't from anything built on this world. And then there were the last few pages. Notes my friend had written. "What is all of this? I keep finding these when I wake up. I'm not remembering things I did in the middle of the day anymore. Oh God, I think I killed a cat. It's hanging from the clothesline in my backyard. I woke up in the basement. I was standing at that keypad. What was I trying to type in? That was the most comprehensible, but that wasn't the worst of it. The handwriting on the weird pages was different from my friend's normal handwriting. I smashed the door to pieces, but I don't know if it helped anything. I just wondered if the rest of her Facebook group is doing the same thing. All 53,000 of them.
I hope you enjoyed At Your Command, as written by Seth Paul and performed by Jason Hill. Up next, we've got a second tale for you, another CTFDN original, authored by series creator Craig Groshek and Amazon best-selling author Blair Daniels. In it, a young man and his troupe of paranormal investigators checks out a purportedly haunted hotel in South Dakota, only to find out there may be more lurking in the legendary abode than your common phantasms. Before I proceed, however, I'd like to quickly tell you a bit more about tonight's sponsor, Astonishing Levels. If you're looking for in-depth analysis of legendary, strange, and unusual events from throughout history, then you've got to check out the Astonishing Levels podcast. Scott Philbrook and Forrest Burgess have been hosting Astonishing Levels since 2014 and have accumulated over 67 million listens to date. That many fans of the fearsome can't be wrong. Astonishing Levels uncovers the truth behind legends you thought you knew by exploring every possible explanation, from the skeptical and mundane to the far edge of fringe. As a listener, you'll have more information than you ever imagined, and you'll get the opportunity to decide for yourself whether the stories at the root of these mysteries are nothing more than old wives' tales, or the honest-to-God things of nightmares. Scott and Forrest have covered everything from Skinwalker Ranch to Bigfoot to a case of demonic possession known simply as the sludge entity. And through exhaustive preparation for their interviews, you'll hear the most comprehensive and thorough conversations with experts, authors, and researchers. So, what are you waiting for? Be sure to listen to the Astonishing Legends podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts, and check out the links in the video description. Thanks so much for your time, and don't forget, support Chilling Tales for Dark Nights when you visit our sponsors, and your support means a lot to us. Now that we've done our part to refer you to some additional nightmare fuel, allow me to amplify your insomnia with another terrifying tale. From authors Craig Groshek and Blair Daniels, as performed by Jason Hill, I present to you The Haunting of Room 812.
It was the most haunted room in all of South Dakota. Haunted by the lady in white, a bride who is left at the altar and jumped from the window to her death. Or, if you asked some, a woman who was brutally murdered by her husband-to-be. "Are you picking up anything?" Darren asked, staring at his K2 meter. "Nope," I replied. "No activity so far. How about you?" Darren turned to Annabelle, the red-headed woman holding the camcorder. "No," she said, looking at the screen. "Nothing." "Let's go in then, see if we get anything." I pulled out my keycard and shoved it into the door. The lock clicked, and I pushed the door open. The room was dark and cold. My hand skimmed the wall, searching for a light switch. Even as a ghost hunter, I didn't like walking into totally dark, strange rooms. The lights flicked on, and we found ourselves in what appeared to be a normal room. Perfectly made bed, small windows, cream-colored walls, We all stared at our meters and cameras for a good hour. Unfortunately, not so much as a glowing speck of dust made its appearance. Darren was the first to give up. He groaned in disappointment and flopped onto the bed. Man, we're not catching any breaks here, are we? Nope. And I was sure we'd catch something, I grumbled. This stinks. My thoughts weren't on spooky ghosts, but our dwindling YouTube ad revenue. Every ghost hunting video we posted garnered fewer views. We needed this. One blurry silhouette, one bout of flickering lights, one chair moving on its own accord. Something. Maybe it's time we hire a video editor, Darren said, staring blankly at the meter. I mean, all the other channels do it. A little blur, some glowing orbs. No! Our whole thing is that our videos are real. We do not Photoshop. We don't edit. We post real stuff only. I crossed my arms and glared at him. You want to sell out? Resort to forgeries? I want to be able to pay my rent, he said into the pillow. And eat something other than ramen. Guys, shh. Annabelle brought a finger to her lips. The tinny ding of the elevator pierced the silence, followed by heavy footfalls outside. Someone's coming off the elevator, Darren said. What's the big deal? It's 1 a.m., Annabelle whispered. Who'd be up this late on a Tuesday night? The three of us swarmed the peephole. From what I could see, the elevator doors were open, and I heard faint footsteps. But no one was there. Probably just some guy going down to get a snack, Darren said. Looks like this place really is just a tourist trap, I said, spinning the hotel pen between my fingers. Just like most haunted places are. The night's not over yet, boys, Annabelle said, but her tone wasn't very convincing. We returned to our stations around the room. Annabelle set up her camera on a tripod and remained filming, but pulled out a tabloid magazine and turned her attention to that instead. Darren played games on his phone. I collapsed on the bed and stared at the ceiling. The hours ticked by. Around 3 a.m., Annabelle caught a glowing orb on film, but upon closer inspection we realized it was just a mosquito flying near the lens. They've gotten better footage in the Walmart parking lot, Darren complained. This blows. It was around 4 a.m. that things started to get interesting. At exactly 4:11, the familiar ding of the elevator sounded again, followed by the same heavy footsteps. Annabelle leapt up and pressed her eye against the peephole. Guys, come here! We crowded around. The elevator and the hallway were both empty. The footsteps, however, sounded like they were inches from our door. She flung the door open. We walked out, cameras out and recording. As soon as we did, the footsteps ceased. But strangely, the elevator doors remained open. Annabelle ran inside and motioned for us to follow. Keep recording, she said breathlessly. I feel like there's something here. My gaze fell on the elevator buttons. The buttons for the 3rd, 5th, and 7th floors suddenly lit up at once, without being pressed. Did you see that? I cried. Darren and Annabelle nodded. A haunted elevator, huh? Well, that wasn't in our research. Of course not, Annabelle said, as the elevator slid to a halt at the 7th floor. The doors opened with a whoosh, and the empty hallway presented itself. The Alex Johnson Hotel wants tourists to get creeped out and buy their spooky little ghost package. They don't want tourists to hurt themselves communing with actual spirits. Her eyes met mine. Or worse. Why is it only stopping at odd-numbered floors? The 3rd floor is where Alex Johnson lived, but why the 5th? Why the 7th? Annabelle shook her head. I have no idea. Or this whole elevator business is the result of a technical malfunction and the floors are chosen at random. Will you shut up, Darren? Annabelle said, rolling her eyes. "The elevator is haunted. I can feel it." We came to a stop at the 5th floor. The doors parted, revealing an empty hallway that looked exactly like the hallway on the 7th and 8th floors. Then, they quietly slid shut, and the elevator descended. This time, it seemed to go twice as fast as before. I gripped the bar, steadying myself. Another high-pitched ding signaled our arrival, and the door slid open. What the hell? The 3rd floor was dark. Not completely, I'll admit. There was a dim light coming from somewhere, but it was much darker than any other floor we'd stopped on. I could barely make out the beige carpeting, the cream walls, the door extending into the distance. "Holy crap," Darren said in disbelief. "Are you getting this?" I peered at my camera's viewfinder. In it, the floor was fully lit, and identical to every other floor we'd stopped on. No, that's impossible," I said, my mouth growing dry. Oh, there's something wrong. It looks normal on screen." I looked back up, nearly had a heart attack. A figure stood, barely visible, at the end of the hallway. Its head canted to the side, as if out of curiosity. It was unsettling, how perfectly it blended into the shadows. There's someone out there," I whispered hoarsely. Instinctively, my hand reached for the close doors button on the elevator. The doors did not close. The elevator didn't respond at all. The specter continued to stare at us, its head cocked at an unnatural angle. It was too dark to make out anything else about them. Their hair, their clothes, their gender. It was all impossible to tell. I only knew one thing. They were getting closer. I reached for the elevator button. My finger touched the plastic. And then, I flew forward. I crashed hard into the carpet, the air rushing from my lungs. I sucked in a choking breath and tried to regain my composure. The elevator doors were closing, and in the quickly narrowing gap, I saw Annabelle and Darren's faces, staring back at me with an odd combination of horror and satisfaction. "Wait!" I screamed, frantically clambering to my feet. It was too late. My hands fell on closed doors. I pounded my fists against them. They didn't budge. I was trapped. I whipped around, my heart pounding. The wraith was gone. "Okay," I reasoned aloud. "Just call back the elevator and everything will be fine." I turned back to the elevator. The call button was gone. Where it had once been a blank wall surrounded the doors. "What the hell is going on?" I shouted. My only option was to make my way back to our room the old-fashioned way. The stairs. With a nervous gulp, I traversed the dimly lit hallway, half expecting the closed doors flanking me on either side to burst open at any moment. An odd, static buzzing came from behind some of them, like the sound of thousands of flies struggling against their restraints. As I passed one of the doors, I heard the muffled voice of a man. Maybe he knew where I could find a working elevator. I wasn't looking forward to walking up 5 flights of stairs. "I've been trying," I overheard them say. "I've been trying to leave for 3 days, and I raised my fist and knocked. As soon as I did, the voice abruptly cut off. I waited, staring at the door. That's when I noticed the numbers hanging on its door. 308 were upside down. The door cracked open, revealing the sliver of a wild eye glaring back at me. It was that of an old man, from what I could tell. The deep wrinkles of his face were bathed in shadow, making it look as if he'd been carved from wood. "You're not one of them," he growled, as if it were some sort of shocking revelation. No. Listen, I came down the elevator, but there doesn't seem to be a call button down here. Do you know if there's another elevator?" I glanced around at the dark hallway. "And why are the lights so dim on this floor?" He stared at me for a moment. "Get out," he rasped. "Get out before it's too late." "What?" "Find a door, a window, anything, and get out!" The door slammed in my face. Confused and slightly disturbed, I continued down the hallway. The lights dimmed nearly to the point of extinguishing, flickering softly in their glass bulbs. Over and over I lost my bearings, unable to determine which direction I was going. For what felt like an eternity, I felt my way along the walls, desperately trying to find my way until finally I arrived at the stairs. Then, I began that long, hard climb to the 8th floor. With every step, the man's words echoed in my mind. "Get out. Get out." What did he mean by that? And the figure in the hallway. I had been ghost hunting for 5 years and I'd never seen something like that. Standard fare, including glowing orbs, odd tapping sounds, shadowy figures in the corner of my eye, things that could technically be explained away by logic. This could not. By the time I got to the top, I was panting and sweat clung to my shirt. I pulled the door open with a groan and walked down the hallway. The hallway was dark, just like the 3rd floor. It must be some sort of hotel-wide power problem, I told myself. That actually made me feel better. Maybe everything that happened, the elevator buttons, the dim lights, was due to an electrical issue. It was an old hotel, after all. Maybe. In all the confusion, I'd imagined the shadows, and the old man was just some lunatic. I walked down the hallway, my shoes thumping conspicuously against the carpet. The silence was ominous, though not unexpected. After all, I reasoned everyone was sleeping at this hour. I arrived at room 812 and inserted my keycard into the door. The lock clicked, and I pushed the door open. The room was pitch black, even though I was sure we kept every light on when we left. "Annabelle!" I called. "Darren? You here? We need to talk." Silence. I walked down the short hallway into the main room and froze in my tracks. Frigid air rushed in through the open window. On the windowsill, surrounded by billowing curtains, there stood a feminine figure, facing away from me, wearing a white wedding dress. "Hey!" I called out to her. "What are you doing in a room?" The words barely out of my mouth when she pitched forward. I heard the soft rustle of fabric and the whistling wind as she plummeted towards the ground. Then, with a sickening crack of flesh against pavement, everything went still. Nausea washed over me. I fought the urge to vomit. I pulled out my phone and dialed Annabelle, my fingers nervously slipping over the screen, and was met with a busy signal. Same for Darren. And for the police. Each and every time, I failed to get through. Then, my eyes fell on the hotel phone. I ran over to it and dialed 0 for the front desk. It rang. A moment later, a man's voice answered. "Hello?" It all came rushing out. "Oh, thank God. Listen, I need your help. I just saw this woman, and she jumped, and I can't find my friends, and..." "Come to the front desk," he responded in a slow drawl. Then the line went dead. I stared into the abyss of the desolate room. Then, I got up, averted my gaze from the window, and walked back down all 8 flights of stairs. When I finally wandered into the lobby, I found it deserted. The only faces I encountered were decorative and inanimate. The Alex Johnson Hotel had no less than 6 faces, wearing feathered headdresses, carved into the beams of the hotel. When I looked up, I could swear I saw a flash of darkness in the balcony overhead. In an instant, however, it was gone. I ran toward the front desk. "Is anyone here?" I shouted. "Hello?" a voice called out of the darkness. A man bustled out of the back, portly and middle-aged, with a carefully curled mustache and a pair of round glasses. "What may I help you with?" he asked, lips curling into a smile. "I just got called from upstairs. Someone just jumped out from the 8th floor window." "Not to worry," he said, cutting me off. His eyes locked on mine. "She does that every night." I'm sorry, but..." "What?" I responded incredulously. "Oh, my dear boy, if you haven't noticed, you're not in South Dakota anymore." I looked around. "That's ridiculous. Of course I am. This is the Alex Johnson Hotel. What are you talking about?" "Oh, it certainly looks like the Alex Johnson Hotel, doesn't it?" he said, casting an adoring glance at the ceiling. "Ah, yes. The attention to detail is remarkable. We have Agneta to thank for that. Lovely woman, really. Have you met her yet?" "Listen, you tell me what the hell is going on right now. I just saw a woman jump from an 8-story window, and this crazy guy on the 3rd floor told me to get out, and when I try to call my friends, I get a busy signal." "Of course, my boy. If it'll make you feel better, allow me to explain." He leaned over the front desk, his mouth stretching into a smile. It was only then that I realized there was something wrong with his face. His eyes protruded too far from their sockets, and his lips were so thin they were barely visible. "The lift that brought you here," he said, gesturing to the elevator, "travels beyond the veil." "Are you saying I'm dead?" "Oh, no. Well, not exactly, but if you don't find your way back soon, you'll find escape quite impossible. And you may as well be." "How do I get back? I need to get to Annabelle and Darren." He cut me off with a peal of laughter. Shivers crept down my spine. "Why so much concern for them? They're my business partners, my friends, my... The words caught in my throat. "My teammates." "Are you certain of that?" I nodded. "They lied to you." I balked. "What would you know? I've never met you before in my life. Besides, you're just a front desk clerk." "On the contrary, my boy, I know many things." His eyes twinkled and he leaned forward. A musty, rotten smell came off him, and I cringed. "When you were 10 years old, for example, you stole a pack of gum from a shop on 4th Avenue. When you were 18, you were heartbroken when you walked in on your girlfriend." "How do you know about that?" I demanded. "I have my ways, Kyle, and I'm certain you weren't pulled from the lift by some supernatural force. His bulbous eyes stared me down, his lips curled into an insidious smile. You were pushed. My mind raced. I tried to think back to exactly what had happened when I fell onto the 3rd floor. I couldn't recall. One minute I'd been standing in the elevator. The next, I'd been thrown to the ground. It's the human condition, you know. Greed. What did your companions stand to gain by pushing you? Control of the business? Under new management, ooh, they can run things however they see fit. Rage burned within me. I didn't want to believe it, but I knew. I knew he was right. How do I get back? The clerk grinned rapturously, revealing rows of yellow teeth. Oh, I'm afraid it's too late for that now. I turned around. Dark silhouettes filled the lobby, just like the ones I'd seen on the 3rd floor. Their crimson eyes flashed as they stepped toward me. It's been a while since we've had a newcomer, the man behind the desk said, practically salivating in his excitement. At that moment, against all odds, above the fear and terror, an unexpected courage surged within me. It's me against this world, I realized. I wasn't going to go out like a coward. Not now, not ever. I watched the shapes swirl and advance in my direction. Across the dust-covered floors and faded carpet they came, the very formulation of the hotel quaking beneath their feet. Meanwhile, shadows coalesced on the balconies overhead, watching hungrily. I was completely surrounded. I sprinted to the stairwell. The shadows pursued me with superhuman speed, spiraling around the staircase. In an effort to lose them, I exited on the 3rd floor and dashed towards the elevator, hoping to reach it before they realized I was no longer on the stairs. But to no avail. The ominous static sound returned. As I ran down the hall, each door I passed swung open with an ear-splitting creak, and the buzzing intensified. Innumerable shadows emerged on both sides, blotting out what little light was available. Their red eyes flared in the darkness. I came to a halt at the end of the hallway. The shadows swarmed and quickened their pace. Once again, there was no call button on the elevator, but I didn't care. I wedged my fingers between the doors and pushed them with all my might. With a grunt, I forced them open and squeezed into the elevator. As the cacophonous wail of the wraiths reached their crescendo, I pressed the button for the 8th floor. With a shriek, the doors came to a close, mere moments before a horde of outstretched arms arrived. With a shudder and a groan, the elevator reluctantly ascended. With each second, the din of the screaming specters lessened, until at last they were little more than a gust of wind in the distance. I took a deep breath and did my best to calm down. My relief was short-lived. A moment later, the floor shook beneath my feet. I grabbed the railings as my heart skipped a beat and threatened to evacuate my body. The lights began to flicker. The buttons flashed in a strange syncopated rhythm. And then, the elevator stopped completely. Dread settled in the pit of my stomach. I'm going to be stuck here forever. I ran to the doors and pounded on them as the lights oscillated madly. "Let me out!" I screamed. "Let me out!" Hissing whispers filled the elevator. At first they were scattered and unintelligible, but then they snapped together, forming one voice. "Exchange," they said in unison. "We require an exchange." "Whatever you want," I screamed. "Anything but me, just name it." "Two," the voices hissed through the static. "We demand two in your stead." Yes, fine. Just please let me go. The elevator trembled, and then it plummeted. I screamed the whole way down, but I didn't stop until the elevator made impact, and the crushing pain consumed me, and everything went black. My eyes fluttered open. I was lying on something soft. Up above me, light shone from an outdated fixture on the ceiling. Where am I wondered. I sat up and glanced around. The hallway, the armchair, the bed. I was back in room 812, and across the room, looking out the window, were Annabelle and Darren. Hatred burned within me at the sight of them. This must have been the last thing the lady in white saw before she jumped, Annabelle was saying, holding her camcorder. The window was open, and a cool breeze blew inside. They were oblivious to my presence. Or she was pushed, Darren corrected her. Silently, I rose from the bed and approached the window. The spirits had demanded an exchange. 2 in my place. The choice was clear. Darren and Annabelle would not get away with what they'd done. They'd get what they deserved. Smiling ear to ear, I made my approach. Distracted as they were, my former friends never saw or heard me coming. Without hesitation, I shoved both of them out the window. Their screams echoed for a second or two before the unforgiving pavement put an end to that. With a smirk, I considered the irony of the situation. Darren and Annabelle would finally get proof of the afterlife. Just not in the way they expected. I walked back over to the bed and picked up the hotel phone, dialing the front desk. Hello? I said, in the most convincing panicked tone I could muster. My friends, they just had a terrible accident. They were leaning out the window, filming, and they lost their balance, and oh my God! I faked choking sobs. I think they're dead. Oh my God, they're dead! I hung up the phone. The wintry air swept across my face as I imagined the whereabouts of the two who had tried to take everything from me. I grinned. If room 812 wasn't haunted before, it certainly was now.
I hope you enjoyed The Haunting of Room 812, as written by Chilling Tales for Dark Nights creator Craig Groshek and our good friend Blair Daniels, and performed by the very talented Jason Hill. If you're interested, you can hear more of Jason right here on the Chilling Tales YouTube channel, or search for his podcast, Horror Hill, by name on your favorite podcast app of choice. You won't be sorry you did. Up next, we've got a helping of frightening fiction for you. This one courtesy of author Craig Waltman. In it, we travel from the Black Hills to the rural countryside as two young parents struggle to make sense of their child's new imaginary friend. Without further ado, I present to you Toby.
It was in the year of our Lord 1778 when I, Frank Aaron McDougall, made voyage from Ireland. Carried upon that wind of freedom was I bound towards that shining light across the sea, to mate up with me brother Newley and his kinfolk in the Carolinas. It was a fair and prosperous land, he proclaimed, free from the tyranny of the king's clerics and their prying eyes. An ocean away it was, and a world apart, he said. So, being inclined, I hawked all me worldly possessions and made passage with me dearest wife and sweetheart, Cathy, my wee gentle son, Tom, who was taught of tongue, but so meek and mild was he could even charm the fairies from all their worldly treasures. pure gold the lad was, and his elder sisters Ruth Ann and Elizabeth being the very spitting image of their own beautiful mother. As lovely as Eve they were upon creation's first dawn. We were now to be christened over-mountain men, for the cities wouldn't have us. Dunked in their shameful baptismal of disdain, as my brother would come later to explain. Being he more tongue-in-cheek, of course, as he bellyached and told, "For one reason or another they have sharpened their scalping knives against us, brother." But in his heart he knew it was because we were Calvinists, and being undeterred in the least, I laid me money down in exchange for some acreage adjoining his. For as he gloated, "The earth is so very rich you can grow anything. Why, even the roosters are laying eggs now. And don't even get me started about me pigs. They're the size of horses, and me cows are a sight to behold, like great lumbering elephants they are. I tell you, you'd have to raise barns the size of Heaven's Chapel to store such a bountiful harvest. Nothing but milk and honey as far as the eye can grasp." And so, needing no further swaying, I built the family little cabin. For a mangler, both wood and words am I. For carpentry was to me trade, and doodling in this journal when time pens me down by the ears, when me hands grow idle, and when me back won't bend, and thus these fingers of mine begin to twitch. But alas, farming was another earthly matter altogether. I, being a tiller of wood and not of earth, hadn't dealt with before or much studied on. But God being merciful had in his providence blessed me brother with a green thumb, and one to spare. You'd almost swear he had 5 of them at times, how the ground obeyed him. But alas, from cradle to grave we tread a word of pitfalls to only realize the peril once it's too late. Aye, I remember it as if it was only yesterday. The memory is as clear as the lagoons of the oilless sky. I, as usual, was finishing up clearing away my fields with me good old mule Daisy leading the way, when all of a sudden, like, as fast as ricking an ankle bone, she fell into a gap left by an old rotten stump. It must have been the most long-rooted thing to ever push its ugly face through the topside of God's green earth, and now caught tighter than a quirk she was, wedged in its nook. And not being able to budge her in the least without busting a gut, I threw my hands up and hastened to fetch me brother, being 2 shovels faster than one. Thus we resolved to dig her out. And upon our return, newly complained, "Are you pulling me leg now? Aye, with me own fields to tend and a wife expecting. Is this not April Fool's then?" For my thunder, there stood Daisy leisurely ambling about. And judging from my expression, me brother believed my report and suggested, "Oh, maybe it was some cherky having a bit of fun with you." And being mostly relieved, I thought, if it was, I could have surely kissed each and every one of them. God bless them all, I said, for every ear to hear. So, giving no further mind to it, I soon commenced to planting my crops, when then I first became aware of my son Tom spending more time exploring about the rim of the wood. And thus, I would call a warning out to him. "Don't you leave me eye, son, and watch out for those bugaboos, they'll nab you given half a try." And before long I would be lost in my work again, rooting around like some critter in the dark loam of the earth. And now, as I think back upon it, the boy was most probably gone for hours at a time. Being I so fearful of me crops and all, I paid no never mind to his wanderings, for my time was held captive by the field and plough. I had no time to spare with hungry mouths to feed, no less. But thankfully, though his speech was improving a bit, and that's when I first heard the ring of Toby's name as young Tom struck out as a meteor from a clear blue and said, "Toby likes to smile a lot. He has big square teeth. He don't talk so good either, like me." "Who on earth is Toby, boy?" I inquired. He's the man that lives in the woods. He's the man that pulled Daisy out." "Ah, the man that pulled Daisy out, you say? Well," I asked, "had he any friends to aid him?" "Nope," the child simply answered. "It was just him. I see. I replied, just going along with his ruse. "He must be a really big fella then." "Ah, yes," Tom excitedly shouted. "Well, If you ever see him again, would you kindly ask him to pull these stumps out of the ground for your poor old da? My back's killing me something fierce, don't you know? And then the young'un came up with a real doozy and said,
I think his name is really Mo, but he likes it when I call him Toby. It makes him smile all the bigger, and he calls me Kanakatu, which means Littlefoot.
Then the boy said as he stretched his palm high above his head whilst standing on the very end of his tippy toes.
He lets me stand in his hand, and he picks me up like this, so I can see all the pretty birds in the trees.
Why, I almost wanted to believe the little charlatan as I replied, That is a mighty big fella. And his name is Mohobe, you say?
Aye, that's it,
he said.
And he has a dog too, a great big old wolf. He saved him when he was just a wee pup.
Oh, did he now? I asked. And how did he go about doing that?
He got stuck between two big rocks one day,
he told.
And Toby showed me the one he broke in half to get him out. Toby is really strong.
That he is, lad, that he is, I replied with a great big smile on my face. As well as having a fine name, too. It must be nice to have a Toby always pulling you out of the jam when you find yourself in a fix. Then, listening to the rumblings of my stomach, I asked, You have any of that fine cornbread left your mother gave you? I'm hungry enough to eat a nest full of buzzards' eggs, I am.
No,
he replied.
I shared it all with Toby. He really loves Mama's cornbread, a whole bunch he does.
Well, I said, being hungrier than ever, we best be getting home for some supper or your mother will be sorely cross with us. And we can't have that, can we? And then, I told, having a bit of fun with him, Now, I might not be able to tote you in my hand and all, but I bet my bottom dollar I can give you a lift on my shoulders. And off we went, a ripping and a blazing and a cutting up all the way home. We made such a merry old time of it. There was none better in all the world. And then, later on in the evening, after supper, with all the young'uns nestled away for the night, I told my Cathy about our Tom-Tom's new acquaintance. As I whispered into her ear, Do you know our son has an ogre for an imaginary friend? I never heard him talk so much in my life. It's like, how many pixies can do a jig on the end of your pinky? As many as you want. He has an awfully big imagination, as big as his friend.
Praise be,
my Cathy softly spoke as not to wake the children. It does me heart well. But I guess sure, Frank, he may not be fibbing, for I never known him to tell a lie before. It's like if he said he'd seen a chicken dipping some tobacco. All you have to do is check under its wing to find its snuff box. It has to be, darling, I replied, for no one man could have pulled Daisy out. Not by himself. No, there's not a man made of earth and ore under heaven's eye can do that sort of feat. If you say so, dear, my Cathy softly replied, and thus we drifted off to sleep, pondering such things as they were, when not too long afterwards then, upon the following morning, I sprang as a rule straight in me bed, in the most dreadful mortal fear to the shrillest shriek of death I ever before heard in all my 32 years, for it was me Cathy hollering and yelling from atop the planks in my porch, making such a ruckus as even to wake the slumbering dead in their eternal rest. And as I came a-busting out the door, half out of me wits and still half asleep, was I, almost too afraid to ask what was the ungodly matter, or who, or what had died, when then I nearly tripped over a slain deer left on my front stoop. It took me a second to consider our predicament, and thus I reasoned as I reassured her and said, Don't you be worrying, darling, it was only newly leaving us some fresh venison. And she too agreed and replied, It'll be brammer to have some meat in our potato soup. It'll fill it out nicely, it will. And so we went about our business, when out of the corner of our eye we spied little Tom-Tom standing upon the edge of the field facing the wood, as a pastor toward his congregation, chattering away, when my Cathy remarked, Oh, isn't he sweet?
He's preaching to the fairies which live in the trees.
Then she called out to him.
Tom Tom, come and get your breakfast before it gets cold.
And not long after which I began to dress out the stag with me good old handy book knife, when suddenly it struck me queer not to find a wound upon it. My eyes, indeed, would go blind before finding a mark. When then, I figured it was only my brother and his Indian ways which felled the deer. Therefore, I purposed to ask him this very question later, when time permitted, for I too now had a field to tend, so off I went with hoe in hand to render my daily labour whilst whistling a lively tune. But still, the question caused me some fret. But, however, the notion had soon sprouted legs and taken a skedaddle, for mine eyes angrily beheld something had been eaten on my peppers and potatoes, and the little corner patch I'd planted, and I seen whatever it was had stopped at the radishes, only taking a single bite from one and discarding the rest. And now, too, I found myself preaching to the trees and saying, "That serves you right, you dirty bugger! Gnawing that for a while, ya?" As I shook me fist in the air for cause of all my work and sore back and all, and so I thought in me displeasure, oh well, I'll have to be doing it all over again, like one time wasn't enough already. A fact which gave me no greater lament. It was the vexation of vexations. A true bother it was. But, nevertheless, my dark mood would lighten up again, not wanting my family to see an angry scowl upon my face and all. And when getting home in the evening, I asked McCarthy, "Where on earth has Tom Tom been all the long day? I haven't seen hide nor hair of the little June bug since breakfast." And, as she pointed out the window and informed, "There he is. He's been there quite a spell now, just talking away he is." Then I inquired of her, "Do you not see that darling at all? What are you talking about?" She unknowingly replied, "That tree in front of our Tom-Tom." I said, "Oh, there's not a lick of wind, yet it is swaying back and forth." And then McCarthy, with her eyes being young as they were and sharper than mine, strained all the harder to see, when suddenly all her colour ran out. Her face became as pure alabaster it was, which gave me quite a scare, the most awful sight, I must say. For was she not then petrified as Edith, Lot's once betrothed, as she longingly gazed back towards that evil city's destruction, as she then most stridently screamed aloud and said, "That's not a tree. Oh dear Lord, Tom, get away from there now! Run! Run!" she cried as she smacked the door, high-tailing it whilst pulling at the ringlets of her chestnut brown hair, with me no sooner trailing after her flowery skirt-tail no less. Now, yelling too for what thing I knew not, but me darling Cathy had seen something, and that was for certain sure. Now, our Tom being a good boy, he heeded his mother, and came at Johnny on the spot without nary a complaint. And as we met in the midst of our field, McCarthy scooped him up into her anxious arms, towards her thrashing breast. Why, I never seen her so scared in all my life, as she then swung upon her heels, ablazing her fiery course all the faster back to her homestead. It was as if her feet were bounding upon air, never touching the ground once. So truly afraid me wife was is all the words I have to tell. And now, it seemed though, the acres would never end in their merciless, endless track. They just went on and on, rolling out as 100 miles or so before us, until I reckoned me worn-out legs were going to fall off for sure, and thus was I sorely tormented by the fact that just maybe I should have gotten a farm just a wee bit tinier instead, for apparently my eyes were bigger than my plate, it pondered. And as this thought was yet bouncing round and accusing me of its various accusations, with me 2 lungs a burning as a red-hot poker inside. Now, as if setting me very ribs upon fire like dry kindling it was. One most thankfully, alas, it couldn't have arisen any sooner, as we then flew headlong through the door in our mad dash. Now flopping we were as 2 fishes on the floor, near winded from the heat of the race. and when finally McCarthy had found her breath again, she screamed to me,
"For heaven's sake, lock the shutters and bar the door! My God, have mercy upon us!"
And still not knowing I did what she bade, she sat there just shivering in the corner whilst holding our little tom-tom with Ruth Ann and Elizabeth, and now all but tears, asking,
"What's wrong? What happened to Mama?"
"I don't know, girls, but everything will be all right," I said, as I tried to calm them all down. All except for little Tom-Tom, for he showed no fear at all. And tried though as I might, I couldn't figure what ailed me poor wife. For my Cathy wouldn't speak of it in fear. If she gave words to it, it would become real, or something. So I asked Tom-Tom directly, "What did your mother see?" And then I seen Tom-Tom loved on his mother's neck all the harder with his tiny little arms, as he thusly spoke with the sweetest words of encouragement as only a child could do. "Don't you be afraid. Toby will never hurt you. We're friends." And alas, when me darling Cathy calmed down, she said, "I don't want you to play with Toby no more, and stay out of the woods, do you hear?"
"Oh, do I have to, Mama?"
Tom-Tom unhappily whined.
"I really mean it, young man, and I'll give you a scalpit lug,"
his mother told, and by all appearances it looked like she meant every word of it, and was soon to do it for sure. And then I asked, "Dear heart, what did you see?"
"Frank,"
she finally told,
"if I wasn't such a Christian, I could kill your brother for bringing us out here. A land flowing with milk and honey and giant cows. Well, he didn't say anything about monsters. It was the most evil thing I've ever seen. Its eyes just hung there as two great big old empty suns, just staring back into me soul from a black sky." "Oh, Mama, Toby ain't no monster. He's good," little Tom-Tom cried out. "You mind your mother, dear heart," she replied. "I don't want to hear that beast's name ever mentioned around here again." "But darling, what did you see?" I asked again. "I don't want to talk about it," she snapped, and seeing her mind was made up, I let it alone. But even still, I couldn't help but saying beneath my breath, perhaps it was just some sort of trick of the light. Which, of course, she quickly overheard and chided, "A trick of the light, my eye! I know what I saw. A monster it was." Oh boy, I thought to myself. It was going to be a long hot night under a Carolina moon, jumping at every sound and with no supper no less. I must say, I felt as helpless as a motherless child in regards to the whole ugly matter. It was like trying to resurrect the ashes of which I had no power over. It wasn't like I was the good Lord or something. Still, to my surprise, when morning finally came, all was well again. It was as if nothing happened at all. And when I went out on the porch to stretch me stoved-up legs, I was dealt an even greater shock. For now, I saw all the stumps had been pulled from the ground, with their roots pointing sunny side up for the first. And that's when I felt wee Tom-Tom's little hand in mine whilst saying, "Toby is really strong, isn't he? Toby likes potatoes. He hopes you like the deer." And it was the first I was at a loss for words. All I could think, I was going to be spending the rest of me life covering them bloody holes. But at least they were gone now, thank goodness. And once I gathered my thoughts, I further inquired, "Did you ask your ogre friend to do all this for your poor da?" But before the child can answer, I seen me brother Newly come a-running across me field, wildly flaying his arms and rifle about, and yelling something about the British, and, alas, when we were finally face to face, he told, "Let me catch my breath for a minute." And when he had, he said, "Cornwallis and his toadies have their eyes on our neck of the woods. Mind your Cathy and young'uns and hide all your valuables. They have sticky fingers, don't you know?" Are you certain of this?" I asked. "Trust me," my brother said. "Ferguson is on the move, and he promises to lay waste to our lands with fire and sword if we don't surrender our arms and bend the knee to him."
Then he said, I sent me wife to her parents, and now I'm headed directly for Sycamore Shoals to join up with Shelby and his patriots. And, as he was leaving, he yelled over his shoulder, Brother, when life deals you an axe, it's best to get started to chop in some firewood. And as I turned round whilst wringing me hands together as my brother fled from sight, I seen my Cathy glaring at me with those steely blue eyes of hers, which directly sent a shiver up my spine, as she now complained for a goodly reason. And thus, I was bracing for a "I told you so," as she admonished. Frank, you know I love you and all, but as God is my witness, I could really kill your dumb brother. Roosters laying eggs, pigs the size of horses, and now the British coming about to spoiling the land as the 10 plagues of Egypt. What on earth have we found ourselves in here? Yes, I thought to myself. What have we found ourselves in? A dread pondering it was which rattled round as a dark pebble within the echoes of my mind. For sure, I had a bad night, and now I was guaranteed to have an even worse day. What else could go wrong? The notion stabbed betwixt my ears over and over again as a knife. Yes, it seemed we were all in the eye of a perfect cack storm, blowing its stinky muck about. And all I could think, I didn't even have to leave my own fireside. And yet, trouble came a-knocking. Oh well, tomorrow will be a better day, I thought. So I said, Darling, let me fix you some breakfast. I'll make your fritters just the way you like 'em. Seeing that she was still madder than a wet-setting hen, of course, for her fear had long since stewed over into anger, and it was just my wee hope to smooth things over a smidge. But, alas, wasn't meant to be. For I hadn't even finished with me bloomin' sentence yet, when I heard a rifle butt bashing against me door, and upon answering it beheld 4 men dressed in summer coats, all brandishing muskets whilst saying, Will you not join Cornwallis's army? We need men like you to fill his ranks. And my reply was, No, lads, all I want is a bit of peace and to be left alone. And it was clear the tall, skinny one wasn't liking me answer in the least. And, too, it was as if the devil himself was peering down his ear, no less, as he loomed there as a beanstalk. A real skinny malinky longlegs he was, and told, Well then, if you're not a loyalist and will not join the king's army, then that either makes you a rebel or a traitor. And we hang traitors around here, don't we, fellas? And thus, they all agreed, hankering to see some killing. And then he commanded the others by saying, Now drag this man out and hang him upon yonder oak. And as they were dragging me to the tree of my most certain demise, I argued with him, What gives you the right to murder a man in cold blood? Do you not see I have a poor family that'll be left all alone to fend for themselves in this pitiless world? Hence the tall, skinny one, being in charge, glibly said, which, of course, his words didn't exactly inspire confidence in my grim future and all, being he now only interested in stealing and plundering, no doubt. I tell you what gives us the right. The king and his parliament and old Miss Brown Bess here. And, as he patted his gun and further told, Hell has no currency, but it pays its debts in flesh. Now, string him up. I want to see him dance, and mind you not to bind his hands for sure. And then, they left me there, with not even a bloody bucket to stand on anymore, strangling for me breath, and kicking as I swang back and forth as some ghastly pendulum held betwixt the earth and sky, as I listened to the wails of me family a-squalling, all except for my little Tom-Tom. All he did was just stand there and called out, Whoop, 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 as loud as his wee lungs could carry, as all the while the heartless bandits, these 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, chuckled and blithely exclaimed, The boy's lost his mind seeing his father dying. And after which the little runty one petitioned with his dark eyes as black as the Earl of Hell's waistcoat itself and said, Let me stick him with me knife, boss, so as he'll shut his mouth. and the tall skinny one answered, now appearing more as a devilish scarecrow than a man. Aye, there will be time enough later for that, boys. Lastly but not least, the fat grubby one with the gimpy leg most wickedly requested, as he greedily rubbed his paws together whilst wiping the tobacco juice from his snarled lips. After his send-off to the great pearly gates, can we have some horizontal refreshments with his lady folks? As saying this, he grotesquely chewed away on his tobacco plug as a gruff billy goat, giggling the whole time. And thus, the tall skinny one, that dread, scraggy scarecrow of a man, said, as he smiled with a most vile grin, revealing his blackened dead teeth, all spread out like rotten fence posts in his foul mouth. There must be a bit of gypsy in you, for you read me mind to a T. And thus all started their snickering, which made me blood boil all the harder as I tried to kick at them with me loose feet, which, however, only served them to taunt me more, as now the murderous scarecrow cruelly bragged. Best to get all your sinning and killing done while you're still living, 'cause you're going to be dead for an awful long time. And old death won't be letting you have any fun, now will he? And, as before, all commenced to laughing and slapping each other's backsides once more. And then, the fat grubby one said while scratching his gimpy leg, "We're all going to be busting some hell wide open when we be getting there, aren't we, boss?" "Aye," replied the scarecrow. "Hell is a far richer place to be than being a dead-end drunk living down a dead-end track. Just like my sorry old pa. For I put that mad dog down with a frying pan without touching a single drop. Yes, best to be doing all your debauchery while you're still sober, and afterwards, well, you can study the rum. Gives you something to look forward to, doesn't it, lads?" And if like that wasn't already horrible enough, he said, "We're going to be a sight to behold. We won't be playing no second fiddles there, I give you my word. We'd be the devil's very own flesh puppets," threw in the fat grubby one, just for sorry measure he did, and judging from the cut of his eye, who can stop us from having his fun? "It's no concern of ours," squawked the little runty one. "We're going to be a living to the ripe old age, and that's for sure." "True," replied the scarecrow with a wink. "It's because of all these pure thoughts and clean living we've been practicing," which only made them belly laugh all the harder a second, until it seemed their sides were going to burst from all their sickening joy. And then, I heard Tom Tom started to his whooping and hollering again, when without warning the little runty one bloodied my son's mouth by giving them the backside of his bonny hand, now striking our wee Tom Tom down with his blinding swipe and crowing, "That'll teach you to shut your clatter trap, boy!" Oh, I wanted to lay hands on him to kill him, but alas, with all me squirming, the rope slipped tighter around me windpipe, and as I was drawing in me last breath, as I seen the world passing before my eyes as one funeral at a time, and alas, it was mine with me poor family soon to follow for sure, by the hands of these murderous cutthroats, no doubt. Now all I was left with me unanswered prayers as I dangled there at the end of me rope, when all of a sudden like it felt I was kicked square in me chest with a full-sized boot, with out of a booming roar so mightily deep, so long and drawn it was. It had the voice of a thunderous waterfall crashing upon rock, which was then quickly preceded by a great tearing through the wood. It all very much sounded to me as a team of draft had broken free whilst hauling a heavy log, as now the tall skinny one, that dread beanstalk of a scarecrow having that filthy smirk wiped clean from his face, most fearful, inquired in his consternation, "What in hell's creation is that infernal noise? Has the devil called forth his unholy choir? Damnation, what is that commotion drawing nigh?" For now, what raced across me field upon the fleetest, most agile feet, even faster, I swear, than the hooves of the swiftest deer. What appeared to be as a wild man 10 or more feet tall, as a raging Irishman he was, all covered in reddish-brown fur. I never seen anything so big and fast in all me life, for he was upon us in an instant, within the twinkling of an eye. So sudden it all was, striking like a disaster, that no one had time to even utter a word, much less cry out. For now it all became as the fox which found itself in the chicken house to steal itself a hen, only to realize a ravenous lion in its wait, when suddenly, as from nowhere, the hairy giant landed in our midst as a blinding bolt. As a great flaming mountain he was, as he kicked the fat grubby one with a gimpy leg dead level in his stinking pot-belly. Now making it was the most terrible crunch, as I sent him a-sailing as some unspeakable ghastly ball with his stubby arms and legs cartwheeling for better than 20 yards or more. Just as he grabbed and broke the rope, I was slowly strangling on. All mind you, whilst he was going about his goodly deed, he held in his other hand the barrel end of the tall skinny one's musket, which then the murderous scarecrow promptly fired into his massive chest, and with but a jerk, the giant flung the man, he and his rifle, over me field. He was now as a scarecrow, riding a witch's broom, cawing all the way through a flock of blackbirds for. Alas, he held on to his gun to the bitter end, as he landed on me picket fence with a great crashing thud. Then the raging giant with his now free other hand became as a gardener, and plucked the head clean off the other, as a crofter would a rotten apple from its laden branch. And lastly, he laid halt to the little runty one by his scrawny shins, and began to wield him as an axe to the oak, now girding his body round what was intended to be my death tree for sure. And alas, when all was said and done, when the bloody butcher's bill was paid in full, I just stood there with me little Tom-Tom clinging to his gargantuan leg. Then McCarthy said, "He's not pretty, and I'm not ugly, but he's the most darling thing I've ever seen." "That he is," I replied as I wiped the blood from my eyes for cause of all my choking, and after a brief coughing spell I cleared my throat and finished with me saying, "You can have all the victuals from me field and cornbread you want. Why, you can even take supper with us at dinner table if you like." And that's when these eyes, still being a bit blurry from me botched hanging and all, had spotted a little trickle of blood issuing forth from his colossal chest, and I could just barely make out the hind end of the lead shot peering. And thus I marvelled how his physique had stopped the ball dead in its track. He was as 1,000 pounds of iron with the strength of Samson. No man or beast on earth could stand against when he was crossed. Still, me old puzzler was scattered about a bit, which left me with a terrible ringing in me ears, but at least it wasn't as a belfry going off in me head no more, as mercifully it had begun to slacken off, as me blood flow resumed its natural course from me neck up, when suddenly I heard me Cathy exclaim with her hand to her forehead, "Dear Lord, Frank, we've got to get rid of all these corpses. For what will we tell the constable? We certainly can't bring up Toby, can we?" "Yes," I pondered. Bodies are indeed a hard thing to explain away, and then the thought popped in me head, and went straight to me mouth, without stumbling once. "We'll plant him as hole fillers for the stumps. They weren't much good for anything else in life, but they will make great compost for me plants." And then, as I craned me head up towards Toby, now lost in his shadow was I, with me neck still a-paining me something fierce, still feeling much like a limp noodle and a foot longer it was, and said, "I don't know exactly who or what yard, or the whence you come from, or where you bound, but I do know there's good in your heart, for you found a place in it for our Tom-Tom." And then I thanked him, and told, "You're a far sight better than most. You ask for nothing, You did give so much of yourself. Thank you for saving our lives and all you done. May God bless you for doing it. And as he looked down upon me, now mollycoddling me wee youngin' so friendly in his tree-like arms, I swear, I saw him crack a great big old smile, and by George, Tom Tom wasn't lying, for he did have big, square teeth, after all. Now it was all so very amazing, and once again I was glaikit for words. I had none to spare or explain, for how could I? And so, time being no man's friend, we went about our business of planting the nameless rogues, just as nameless as they were as from the accursed day their poor mothers birthed them. And mercifully, no one was ever the wiser. All except for the worms, of course, and they tell no tales. All glory to the heavens above be praised. Now, ever since, when my mind returns to that fateful day, I say to myself, when the world has ye against the dike with its icy fingers wrapped around your chucking bone, with all its sinful death according to men lost in their wicked ways, it's nice to know there's a Toby standing in your corner to catch you when you fall. It does my heart good to know you're out there, my friend, that there still be a bit of magic left in the world, after all.
I hope you enjoyed Toby, as written by Craig Waltman and performed by Jason Hill. If you're interested in seeing your work appear here on Chilling Tales for Dark Nights, we accept submissions. Send your original fiction in to director Craig Groshek at craig@chillingtalesfordarknights.com with story submission in the subject line alongside the title of your tale, and we'll take a look. We look forward to seeing your amazing work. Up next, we've got another dose of darkness. Another Chilling Tales original from the delightfully dastardly mind of Seth Paul, inspired by the new single of the same name by Iowa hard rock band Slipknot. In it, a man running from his problems runs into some rather unusual strangers in a restaurant who just can't wait to get to know him better, only to find they might already know him better than he knows himself. Without further ado, I present to you Birth of the Cruel, Together We Burn.
I was drinking my sorrows away at the bar when I first noticed them. Everyone else seemed to move right by, not giving them a second glance, but I couldn't understand why. They sat in a booth, having drinks, laughing, but not doing a lot of talking. They just stared at the people who came and went, almost leering, like they knew some big secret that they weren't telling anybody. If they were goths, it would have made a lot more sense, but there was no makeup, no fishnet shirts or black hair or dour expressions. They almost looked homeless. But even then, there was more to it than that. One had misshapen fingers that were bent back or stunted. One had several missing teeth, and the rest filed to points. One had a blind, glassy eye, and one appeared fairly normal with the exception of extensive burn marks along his arms and neck. I couldn't help but stare back once I became aware of them. It was such an odd crew, just sitting there. I don't even remember seeing anyone give them their drinks, but they had them. Drinking and ogling. Drinking and ogling. I finished my cocktail, put some cash on the counter, and went over to their booth. I would like to think the reason why I approached them was that I was a few sheets short of full-blown drunkenness. But it was more than that. I was curious. I couldn't help it. Like a magnet to a pile of iron shavings. Of course, as I came, they stared at me, grinning and laughing as they had been. The one with the filed teeth unnerved me, but it didn't scare me away. The one with the burns rested his chin in one hand, leaning on the table. "Can we help you?" he asked. I stammered, not quite knowing how to react, at which he waved his other hand. "Take a strong man to walk over here and talk to the likes of us? Why'd you do it?" I just saw you sitting here and saw us sitting here and wanted to, what? Say hello. Haha. Well, like we're old friends, eh? The others laughed again. "No, I just thought you looked out of place." "Ah, of course we do. That's because we are, and we're glad of it." He slid down the booth and patted the seat next to him. "Join us. It's fine. We're not big on new company, but it's not every day someone comes to us." I sat down, and almost immediately my nose was hit by a foul stench. It wasn't just the scent of unwashed clothing and bodies. It was more. Something more rancid, old, earthen. I was pressed in tightly to the seat, and even as my arm brushed against the burned man's clothes, feeling the tattered fabric, I didn't flinch away, even though my mind wanted me to. "I'm Joshua." The burned man touched his chest and then pointed to the one with the odd fingers. "That is Matthew." Sharpteeth was next. "That is Daniel." The blind one, without waiting for Joshua, touched his own chest. "Nathaniel, but call me Nate. Nobody does." More laughter. More drinking. A bored waitress came by and set down more glasses, one even in front of me, and left. That was the first time I saw anybody other than me come to their table, and she didn't even look up at them. "Have a drink," Joshua said as he eyed the glass, then me. "But I didn't order." "We always order an extra just in case. Matthew usually ends up having it, but it's yours tonight." I had to admit, it did look enticing. It was the kind of drink I usually ordered, and nobody had touched the glass yet. I shrugged and tipped it back. More guffaws, even some backslapping. It tasted good. Nothing special, but it helped push my blues away somewhat. Matthew finished his drink and let the glass slip through his stubby fingers onto the table. "So, what brings you to a place like this on a cold October evening?" "My sister's in the hospital. Car accident." A loud collective "aww" went up from the table. It sounded very insincere. "And what happened? She have a few drinks and decide the world was her own personal speedway?" I was taken aback by the joke. I almost got up from the table, but something inside had me glued to my seat. "No, I was driving and the car went off the road and she didn't have her seatbelt on. It was a few days ago. I've been at home or the hospital since then." Daniel frowned. It hid his teeth well, and I was glad for it. "Is she in a lot of pain?" "I don't know. She's not responsive, so she can't tell us anything." Daniel slammed his fist on the table. "Damn it! That's always the most important part." He flashed those horrid teeth of his again. This time, I really went to stand up, but Joshua put a hand on my shoulder. No, don't leave yet. We tend to have a very dark sense of humor. It's the way we see the world is all." "Doesn't seem like it's a very good outlook." Well, it all depends on your viewpoint. We consider ourselves people watchers. On the outside, looking in." Joshua turned his head and watched a man getting out his keys, stumbling slightly towards the door. Nobody else seemed to be noticing him leave. "For instance, I have a feeling this place is going to get sued in the morning. So, be sure to drink up now." "Shouldn't we stop him?" "And get involved with people?" "What would he say if I came up to him and told him to call a cab?" "He'd push me away. I'm not someone he cares about. None of us are. We are broken. But we are the wiser for it." Joshua sipped his drink. Behind me, the front door jingled open and then shut. I wanted to get up and try to do something, but my feet were leaden. Why wasn't I doing anything? "Broken?" I asked. "What do you mean by that?" Nate leaned over the table. his milky eye somehow looking at me more intently than his good one.
Look at us, buddy. Do we look like the kind of people you normally walk around with?
Matthew nodded. We've all been rejected, and that's fine with us. Why be a part of it? We've seen what it's truly like. We're not missing much. Yes, Joshua concurred, setting his glass down and rubbing my shoulder vigorously. That smell came wafting back again, and along with it came something I hadn't noticed before. A scent like fried bacon. We are wiser because we know what lurks in humanity and choose not to be a part of it. He looked down at the half-empty glass. Well, unless we absolutely have to. But even that's part of the fun. They suddenly all stood up, and for the first time since I sat down, I found my legs and got up out of the booth. Joshua threw something onto the table. I thought at first he was paying for the bill, but upon a second glance, the wad didn't look like money. He saw my double take and smiled. Oh, that. Just a tip. She won't want to take the advice, but she should. Come. In a daze, I found myself following them outside, walking the streets, seeing the city around us passing by with but a few lonely stragglers making their way home, or wherever, heads down and ignoring us. Even as Daniel and Matthew whooped and hollered and ran back and forth, no one gave us any attention. Joshua moved in close to me once more. See? No one cares about us. We're right here, sometimes in their faces, but they move on, either not seeing or not caring to see. They have better things to do. To pay attention to us would mean taking a moment out of their busy lives to stare an ugly reality in the face, and most don't. The true cruelty of the world is too much to comprehend. But I saw you. I realized I still had the drink glass from the bar in my hand. I would have to remember to take it back. Yes, you did. Why do you think that is? I don't know. Oh, I think you do. You just don't know that you know. We passed beneath endless street lamps, twisting through alleys, walking across a deserted park until finally we arrived at a 4-story building. It was dark on the inside, with shattered windows all along the exterior. The October wind picked up a few scattered leaves across our path as Nate pushed the door open and waved us all inside. The stench of urine and old garbage came to me and I nearly gagged, but Joshua's smell soon masked it as I reeled back into him. He grabbed my shoulders and with a gentle push guided me forward. Although I had not seen my lights outside, a dull white light lit up a concrete-walled staircase inside, and we climbed it, our footsteps echoing along the hard surfaces. Daniel screamed out, his voice dreadfully loud in the enclosed space. But still I moved on, following them to the 3rd-floor doorway and out onto what may have once been an office space, but was now devoid of furniture. It was a huge space, littered with abandoned supplies and old painting tarps, and the wind whistled through the broken glass. Inexplicably I could see, even though there was no clear source of light. There was what filtered in through the windows, but as far as I could tell, the building itself had no power. Daniel ran to a window and yelled once more out into the night. Nate went to another, but looked out quietly, as if standing guard. Matthew dug through a pile of debris and found some old magazines, which he started flipping through as well as his fingers allowed him to. Joshua, in the meantime, leaned against a wall and glared across the expanse of the floor. Even though he did the least of anyone else, he was the one who held my attention, and I waited for him to do something. Anything. To speak again. Whether it was to speak to me again or give an order to this weird family. Is this where you all live? Joshua shook his head. Oh, we don't live anywhere. We go wherever we want, whenever we want, and we don't care if anyone owns it or not. A loud metallic clang startled me, and I turned to see Daniel kicking an old can of acetone across the floor, the rusty can still sloshing with the liquid inside. Joshua sighed and rolled his eyes. "Respect, Daniel, I am talking here." Daniel giggled, grabbed a piece of cardboard and started picking his teeth with it. Joshua seemed about to speak again when Nate waved to everyone.
"She's coming down the sidewalk again."
Everyone walked to where Nate was watching, except for Daniel, who ran to it, cardboard hanging from his cat-like jaws. I went as well, and looked down on a lone figure in a pink hoodie, making her way as quickly as she could across the park. "Who is she?" Matthew waved one of his mangled hands vaguely at her. "Every evening that we're here, she comes walking by. She's a college student, lives at home. Doesn't tell her parents she comes this way. She thinks it's safe. But she's never noticed how often she just misses them over there." I followed the path of his twisted index finger to another abandoned building where dark shapes moved inside. I couldn't tell what they looked like, or how many of them there were, but I knew at least somebody, or something, was in there. One of these days she won't be so lucky, but when that day will be, no one really knows.
"Maybe today."
Daniel cackled and slapped his hands on the broken windowsill. One hand caught a piece of glass. He didn't even seem to notice as his hand began leaving behind smears of blood wherever it came into contact. We all watched as the object of our fascination wandered ever closer to the other building. The others got more and more excited, but me, I held my breath, my heart pounding. Nothing was right about any of this. Why had I come here? What was I doing, letting these people take me far away from home? None of this made any sense. A dark shape appeared in the doorway. The young woman stopped, saw it, and screamed. I still could not make out the shape as it darted from the door, chasing her. She sprinted in the opposite direction, towards the building we were in. The others with me laughed. Daniel, of course, was the loudest, but even Joshua had a quiet chuckle at her expense. "How can you laugh?" I cried. "What did she do to deserve this?" Joshua turned to me, facing me directly, and he put his hand on my shoulder again. "Because we aren't like her," he said matter-of-factly. "We aren't part of her world. We've all seen the cruelty of their world and realize we are well removed from it. Don't you agree?" "Why would I agree? What are you talking about?" "Your accident. Was that what it truly was? Was it really?" Suddenly, in my mind, but almost projected in front of me, I saw myself in the car, my sister next to me. We were arguing again. We argued a lot. She told me all about how she didn't understand why she had to go, to be out on her own, out at college with her friends. This place was dead to her, the city choking her off, and she needed her space. Why would I keep her from that? I had had enough. That's why. I had grown tired of the arguments, the endless fighting. She never wanted to help anyone. She was so independent and selfish and never wanted to understand where I was coming from. She had all the answers, and I had none. I remember twisting the wheel in the car and jumping the curb. I saw the tree in front of us. I woke up with some cuts on my forehead, my ears bleeding, one broken finger. She had been thrown through the windshield. No, I hadn't wanted to hurt her. She was my sister. Or did I? Or was I only trying to hurt myself? Either way, the end result was the same. The vision stopped, replaced by another, I saw a man bent over another, beating him ferociously with his bare hands, breaking bones and ripping flesh. The face looked familiar, but the hands did not. These were whole, unblemished. At least, they were. The process of tearing the other man to pieces was doing a fine job turning them to stumps. Their clothes were out of place. They reminded me of movies from the 1940s. The vision changed again. A beautiful house, but dated, like one I had seen pictured at historical museums. Another somewhat familiar face looking through a keyhole, as moans sounded on the other side. He went to a dresser and removed 2 items, a revolver and a hat pin. He checked the revolver, shut it, and then turned to the door. Before he went to it, though, he grabbed the hat pin and turned it towards the eye that had been looking through the keyhole. Another change. The dead of winter. A covered wagon. Frozen bodies everywhere. A lone figure sat in the snow, covered in warm blankets and furs, grabbing fistfuls of flesh from a woman, still warm, breathing heavily and looking at him in shock and terror. The figure threw the long, bloody knife aside, eating some unidentifiable organ, and laughed. Then a final vision. A man in robes, wearing a long beaked mask, dissecting the body of a small child. No, not dissecting. What was the word? Vivisecting. The boy looked up, whining and whimpering, his body covered in boils. A door to the room, despite being heavily barricaded, buckled and bent under the force of many people pushing and shouting. Then the man smiled, touched the dying boy under his chin, and then threw a vial of some liquid on the ground. The unmistakable smell of smoke rose in the air. And it all ended. I looked around the room. You are all monsters. Joshua smiled. And yet you've seen us. That can only mean one thing. You're destined to be with us. You know what you've done. You know how cruel the world can be. It's time to leave it behind. Watch with us. I shook my head and backed away, but I slipped and fell. The glass I had been holding shattered and my head landed on it. My ear, still smarting from the accident, was bleeding when I lifted my head. No, I couldn't have meant to hurt her. I couldn't. Does it matter? You needed to find comfort, and you did what was needed. You know what awaits you for what you've done. Join us, and you need not suffer any further, because we don't suffer. Suffering is beneath us. I slid back and reached behind me as the 4 began to move closer. I threw boxes, debris, anything I could find as they came at me. One of the items sloshed when I grabbed it. I looked at it and saw that it was the can of acetone Daniel had been kicking earlier. The top was far too rusty to try and open, so I grabbed a broken piece of wood and stabbed the container. Then from the hole a few drops and a pungent smell wafted out. I threw the open container, which splashed on Joshua, a trail leading from me to where it landed. I took my sister's lighter, flicked it, and tapped into the acetone trail. The fire blazed to life in an instant. The flames leapt onto Joshua, engulfing him, and then overtook the debris around him. The whole floor began to light up, and the other 3 backed away. I stood and looked back to the exit, the stairwell. I ran for it, then heard a voice calling to me. My name. Had I ever told them my name? Joshua stood amidst the flames. He was surrounded by them, but they didn't touch him. His clothes and skin remained unscathed and intact. "You may run, but we are always here, watching. You don't know it, but we burn. Oh, we burn together." The other three came through the smoke, standing next to Joshua, smiling their cruel smiles. Overwhelmed, I blacked out. The sudden jab of a finger brought me back to my senses. "Hey, we're closing," a nearby bartender chided me. "You can't stay here." I looked around and I saw I was back in the bar. I checked the clock on the wall. 2 a.m. How did I get back here? Had I ever even left? Was it all? On the TV above the bar, where the bartender who had poked me awake was sweeping, was the image of a building downtown, an abandoned office building ablaze. The scenes of a reporter talking to a young woman in a torn pink hoodie. She was crying. She described how she had been attacked, but that the fire had scared off her assailants. She was real. She was alive. If I hadn't tried to escape, she would have been killed. If I had joined them. I felt my ear. A large cut ran along its edge. The bartender looked up from her sweeping and caught a glimpse of my injury. "Wow, was there some glass on the bar? Jesus, that looks like it hurts." "I'll be all right," I assured her. "I have to go to the hospital anyway." I would have been too late to visit my sister at the time, but in the morning I would. And the day after that. And the day after that. Until she got well. That night I saw what it was like to be broken. Now, I'm wiser. Now, I have a chance to fix it.
I hope you enjoyed Birth of the Cruel, Together We Burn, as written by Seth Paul and performed by Jason Hill. Up next, we've got one final fearsome work of fiction from Blair Daniels and Craig Groshek, produced in collaboration with our friends at HalloweenCostumes.com. In it, we discover the dangers of online shopping and modern-day bargain hunting, and what happens when you're not careful about what you're clicking on. If you think identity theft and fraudulent charges are the worst of your problems, you haven't seen anything yet. Without ado, I present to you The Halloween Mask.
Ding! I jolted awake. My phone lit up on the nightstand. It showed one new notification. Motion detected at your doorstep. 3:17 a.m. My heart pounded as my fingers slipped across the screen. I clicked on the security camera video feed. A man stood on my doorstep. He stayed so still. I would have thought it was a photograph, if not for the bugs fluttering by every few seconds. His body melted into the shadows around him, but his face shone brightly. Or, not his face. A white mask. And it was covered in blood. He stared straight at the camera, completely still, mouth twisted in a grin. It all started when I ordered the Halloween mask. Alicia and I decided to host the neighborhood Halloween party this year. I'd shelled out hundreds of dollars on plastic skulls, purple streamers, even one of those candy bowls with the animatronic hand in the middle. "We still need to decide what to dress up as," my wife said, as she neatly stacked the boxes in the corner.
I was thinking maybe Morticia and Gomez?
No, that's cliché. Alicia rolled her eyes.
So what if it's cliché? It's just a neighborhood party. It has to be perfect. Well, whatever it is, you better decide soon, because the party's next weekend.
I scrolled through the costumes on HalloweenCostumes.com, looking for something terrifying, something our neighbors would remember for years to come. Last year, the party was hosted by my rival neighbor, David Chandler. Perfectly handsome BMW driving David. My very own Ned Flanders. One-upping me on everything from lawn care to job promotions. Last year, he threw an incredible party, dressed as the clown from It. He even jump-scared half the guests at various points throughout the evening. People were still talking about how awesome it was. I had to do better.
What about that?
Alicia asked, pointing to a plain white mask. It looked similar to a Michael Myers mask. White plastic forming the shape of a man's face with cutouts for the eyes and mouth. You could make it your own. Add blood or stitches or something. True. I added it to my cart, and after scouring the web for some promo codes, I didn't have much money left after all I'd spent on decorations, found a sketchy-looking website with what appeared to be a legitimate HalloweenCostumes.com promo URL displayed, with the offer code worked into it. It read, HalloweenCostumes.com/promo/selectyourscare20. Without thinking, I clicked it. As soon as I did so, I was redirected somewhere that was definitely not HalloweenCostumes.com. Damn it, I thought. Should have copied and pasted the link instead of clicking it directly. As I pondered how many viruses I'd just been infected with, and before I could do anything else, a strange message popped up, taking up my entire screen. Code input successfully. Select your scare. 1, 2, or 3. What the hell is this? I muttered. I tried to just click away from the dialog box, but it wouldn't disappear. Finally, against my better judgment, I clicked the first option just to make it go away. I was happy to see I was back on the official HalloweenCostumes.com site, with my items still in my shopping cart, and the promo code successfully applied. I can't believe it, I thought. It actually worked. With that important Halloween-related task checked off my list, but many things left to take care of, I went on with my day, and quickly forgot all about the strange pop-up, and eagerly waited my new mask. A few days later, I got an email telling me the package had arrived. October 29th, 2 days before the party. But when I got home, I found an empty doorstep. You didn't see a package? I asked Alicia. Didn't you get the notification? She asked, pinning up purple and orange streamers. We were the victims of a porch pirate. She pulled out her phone and handed it to me. Check it out. We have one of those security cameras by the door, mostly to avoid Bob, our resident traveling salesman, who seems to be selling something new every week. Whenever motion is detected, it pings our phones. Today, I'd been swamped at work, though, and hadn't had a chance to look at it. I pressed play. I saw our doorstep and the brown cardboard box sitting on the doorstep. Behind it, on the sidewalk, was a figure in black. I watched as the man approached. He walked up my sidewalk with confidence, as if he lived there. As soon as he got close enough for me to see his face, he tilted his pale head down. Then he stepped onto my porch and, face still hidden, grabbed the package. He walked back down the sidewalk and disappeared. Why would he steal a package of Halloween costumes? Because your costume was just so amazing. He wanted it for himself. Alicia joked as she lined up bags of candy. It wasn't amazing yet. It was just the mask. I walked over to the table and helped her set up the candy. So we have 2 days, right? What else needs to be done? Well, we need to get new costumes, and I was thinking Morticia and Gomez. I sighed. Fine, we'll do it. I thought that would be the end of it. Some guy stole the package and that was it. We'd never see the mask again. I was sorely mistaken. As I sat at the table a few hours later, dumping candy into decorative bowls, a flash of motion caught my eye. I looked up and saw someone walking in our backyard, at the edge of the woods. They were dressed entirely in black, walking along the perimeter of the forest. In the dusk light, it was hard to pick out any details about them, like their gender or their face. The only thing I could see was that they walked with slow, deliberate movements, and it looked like they were wearing a white mask. I heard Alicia's footsteps behind me and motioned her over. "Alicia, look. There's someone in our backyard."
What? Seriously?
She joined me at the window, but by the time she did, the person had already disappeared into the forest. Well, I'm going up to bed, Alicia said. We can finish this tomorrow. I followed her up. Minutes after my head hit the pillow, I fell into a deep sleep, until I woke up an hour later. I looked at the clock. 1:34 a.m. I pulled myself out of bed and trudged over to the bathroom, eyes blurred with sleep. The moonlight shone in from the window. I walked over to it, as if drawn by the light, and peered into the backyard below. I froze. At the edge of the backyard was a figure, dressed in all black, wearing a white mask, facing our house, standing still as a statue. My heart pounded. I reached for my phone, then remembered it was still on the nightstand. I raced over and grabbed it, then looked back out the window. He was gone. The next day, in the flurry of getting ready for the party, I forgot about what I'd seen the night before. Around 6 p.m., I headed out to the party store to pick up some last-minute things. There, I received a text from Alicia. Well, that was odd in and of itself. I knew she had an important call with a client that evening. Confused, I opened the text. What it said made no sense. I'm glad you found your mask, but can you please stop? I'm on the phone with Evelyn. I quickly texted back. Stop what? She replied, Stop tapping on the window. It's super annoying. I stared at my phone, panic seeping in. Then my fingers raced across the keyboard as I typed. I'm not at home. I'm at the party store. She did not reply. I grabbed my stuff and ran out to the car, phone pressed against my ear. I breathed a sigh of relief when she answered. Ben, I told you I'm on the phone. Alicia, I'm not home. Whoever you're seeing out there isn't me. You need to call the police right now. Memories of the figure I'd seen the night before rushed back to me and I shuddered. But call the police! I yelled. When I arrived home, the police were already there. Red and blue lights flashing in the darkness of our driveway. Alicia stood in the driveway, giving her statement, somewhat begrudgingly. All I saw was someone in a black hoodie, black pants, and a white mask with fake blood all over it. They were over there at the office window. You didn't recognize anything about them? The tall, lanky officer asked. I thought it was my husband, but he was at the store, apparently. Look, I'm sure it's just some teenager from the neighborhood playing a mischief night prank. And if it is, she said, giving me a stern look as I walked over, I don't want to press charges. We were all young and dumb once. The officer laughed at that, an annoying, high-pitched laugh that grated my eardrums. We'll take a look around and follow up with you, Mrs. Breslaw, he said. Thank you. Alicia turned to me, arms crossed, lips pressed into a line. Great. You've just wasted 20 minutes of my time. Evelyn is so pissed that I cut the call short. There was some creep tapping on your window, I shouted back. What? You wanted to just ignore it?
obviously just some teenager. I mean, come on. It's mischief night. I'm just happy it was that and not getting TP'd. Ugh, it takes forever to clean up. Okay, fine. I hurried past her and set my supplies on the table. Then I set to work ripping open packs of plastic spiders and bats. They fell onto the table with a loud, gross plop. I'm going upstairs, Alicia said curtly, leaving me to prepare for the party on my own. Ding! Motion detected at your doorstep. 3:17 a.m. The notification came through on my phone, loud and clear. I tapped on the video feed, half asleep. A man stood on my doorstep. He wore all black. Covering his face was the white mask I'd ordered, covered in something dark. I jumped out of bed. "Alicia!" I whispered, shaking her awake. "Alicia, he's back!" "What?" she murmured. "The man in the mask, he's back! He's standing on our porch right now and..." "Is he TPing in the trees?" "No!" "Then let me sleep," she groaned, rolling over and throwing the covers over her head. I know lots of crazy things happen on Mischief Night, but this crossed a line. A big line. A man standing on my porch in the middle of the night wearing the mask I'd ordered? Probably the same man who'd stolen the mask in the first place, right off my doorstep. Well, this was too far. I crept out of the room and peered down into the foyer. Through the glass insert in our door, I saw him. He stood under the porch light, blurred and distorted through the glass, but I could still make out the white mask, stained red with blood. Should I call the police? Alicia would be mad at me. Screw it, this was too far. My fingers slipped over the screen. "There's a man standing on my porch in a mask," I said, my words coming out as a jumbled string of syllables. As soon as the call ended, the figure shifted. Then it receded, until all that remained was the empty porch. I clicked back to the security camera feed. It too showed nothing but the empty porch and the shadows of the front yard. A sharp knock on the door tore me from my thoughts. I looked down to see two figures distorted through the glass. Two figures wearing blue uniforms. I let the police in and explained everything. I even showed them the security footage. They searched the backyard, but they didn't find anyone. When they finally left, I retreated back into the bedroom. Alicia, thankfully, somehow slept through it all. I locked the door and dragged a dresser over it for good measure. Then, I collapsed into the bed. I didn't fall asleep until the sky brightened with dawn, and the birds began to sing. "Aren't you excited for the party?" I stared out the window like a soulless zombie. I'd slept all of 3 hours, and the fatigue felt like a train driving over me, again and again. But I couldn't nap. There was so much to do. Spider cupcakes and monster fingers to bake, decorations to hang, candy bowls to put out. "Will you hang these streamers in the office?" Alicia asked, handing me a tangled mess of black, orange, and purple. "But no one will be going in there." She quirked an eyebrow at me. "You told me you wanted this to be the best party ever. That you wanted every single room decorated, just in case." Okay, I said, forcing myself out of the chair. I took the streamers from her and entered the office. There, on the desk, was the mask. Mouth twisted into a smile. Gaping holes for eyes, dark red, splattered across the plastic. "Alicia!" I shouted. She rushed into the room. Where did you get this mask?" I stuttered, breathless. "It was on our doorstep this morning." Relief flooded through me. He wasn't in the house. It was just on the doorstep. My entire body shook as I fell into the chair. "Why don't you rest for a bit before the party starts?" Alicia said, laying a hand on my shoulder.
I'll call you down when everyone's here. I nodded. Alicia thought I was overreacting. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was letting a mischief night prank by some dumb teenager mess with my head. I lay down on the bed, ignoring the dings of my phone on the nightstand, and closed my eyes. It seemed like only seconds passed before Alicia was back in the room, asking me to come downstairs. "Everyone's here," she said, "and they want to see you." I followed her down the stairs and froze. Every single person in the room wore the mask. Black clothes with that white mask over their faces, covered in splatters of blood, gaping eye holes, a twisted mouth. I felt dizzy. The room pitched before me and I gripped the banister for balance. "Ben, are you okay?" I swayed, trying to steady myself. Why are they all wearing that?" "They said you asked them to." "What? You didn't?" "No," I said as the crowd blurred before me. "They said you left the masks with a note saying they should wear them to the party. A lot of people canceled because of it. Families with kids, mostly." She turned to me. "You really didn't do it?" "Why would I?" Alicia shrugged. "I don't know. You were obsessed with this party from the beginning, and the mask, I thought maybe..." She trailed off. "If you didn't put the masks in their mailboxes, who did?" Him. The man who had been tapping on the window. The man who had been standing on our porch last night. The man who stole my mask. As my mind swirled with questions, who he was, why'd he do this, a memory popped into my head. The promo code, and the select your scare message. Had I somehow chosen this? I stared into the crowd. 50 masked faces stared back at me, all identical. Any one could be him, or no one. Before I could think, a hand pulled me into the crowd. "Ben, hey, how's it going?" a familiar voice asked behind the mask. Eddie Huntley, the blonde-haired man that lived 3 houses down the street. "It's good," I said, faking a smile. He continued to talk, but I only pretended I was listening. He looked across the crowd. All the masked faces were turned towards each other, bobbing and nodding in conversation. Except for one. One who was staring right at me. I broke away from the conversation. Hey, I shouted, pushing through the crowd. His gaping eyes stared back at mine, soulless and empty. I grabbed the mask and ripped it off, and stared into the face of Mary Chandler, the wife of my rich, luxury-loving neighbor. "Ben, great party. Love the masks," she said in her elegant, soft voice. "Really adds a creepy flavor to the whole thing." Thanks, I stuttered. "Hey, have you seen David? It seems I've lost him." I shook my head. She continued staring into the crowd. Ding! My phone chimed. I slowly pulled it out of my pocket and looked at the screen. Motion detected at your doorstep. 8:32 p.m. I tapped on the camera feed. There he stood. David? Who else could it be? He was missing, and there was the masked man, standing on my porch. Heart pounding, I fought my way through the kitchen, through the family room and over to the front door. Now the porch was empty. I opened the door and stared out into the night. But beyond the halo of light the porch created, everything was a murky mess of shadow. I shut the door. The lights flickered, and then they went out. The room plunged into darkness. Shouts and murmurs sounded across the party. Masked faces whirled about it in confusion. "Turn the lights back on!" a woman shouted angrily. Cell phone flashlights flicked on, twinkling among the crowd of shadows. Ding! Motion detected at your back door, 8:35 p.m. I stared at my phone in horror as I heard the back door creak open, followed by heavy footsteps. I ran through the family room and into the kitchen. The back door hung open, but he was gone, blended into the crowd. Stay calm, I told myself. Get the power back on, then you can deal with finding the culprit. My head pulsed with pain as I considered the two options. Either someone flipped the master breaker, or someone cut the power lines. I decided to check the master breaker first. Alicia, I said, fumbling my way in the darkness towards her. Thank goodness she wasn't wearing a mask like the rest of them. Keep everyone calm, okay? I'm going to check the breakers in the basement. Oh, okay, she said, biting her lip. You think maybe the fog machine was drawing too much power? Yeah. No need to get her worried. Using my cell phone as a flashlight, I stumbled to the basement door. I opened it. The stairs loomed before me, stretching into the pitch-black shadow below. A shudder ran through me. Maybe it was just the fog machine, I muttered to myself, descending the steps one by one. We had a menagerie of Halloween decorations out on the lawn, and it was possible that they blew the fuse. Then why would the whole house be without power? I forced the question out of my head and continued down the stairs. I made my way to the breaker box, my footsteps clicking against the cement. The master breaker was flipped. Someone intentionally walked into the basement and flipped the switch. My heart pounded in my chest. My hand shook as I reached out and flipped the switch back. The lights flickered to life, including the light bulb above my head. For a second, silence. Then someone grabbed me roughly from behind. I whipped around, thrashing against strong arms. A white mask stared back at me, smeared with blood, gaping, empty eye sockets. I tore away and jumped back. My body collided with my workbench. My eyes scanned it. There was my hammer, lying on the wood. I grabbed it. The figure jumped forward. Laughter echoed from beneath the mask, along with a voice. I got you this... I lifted the hammer and smashed it into his skull. The man immediately crumpled. He fell onto the floor, head smacking against the tile. I crouched over him. Then I reached over and pulled the mask off. It was David. Footsteps sounded behind me, then shouts, then screams. Call 911! Someone cried. But David was perfectly still. The police carried him out in a body bag. The guests were gone. The masks were strewn across the floor, the couch, every room of the house. A few were completely crushed, stepped on in the chaos. The back door still hung open, letting in gusts of cold October air. I didn't sleep a wink that night. The image of David's face burned into my mind. I'd heard his wife explain to the police in broken sobs that he'd been planning some sort of prank on me at the party. He hadn't visited the house or stalked Alicia. He'd only planned to scare at the party. She didn't know what it was until the lights went out. He was innocent. I spent half the day sleeping, the other half drunk. When night rolled around, Alicia pulled me off the couch. Sit on the porch with me, she said. Why? It isn't good for you to be inside all day like this. I followed her out, beer in hand. We sat on the back porch facing the forest. Ben, you can't, you didn't mean to, she forced out, glancing in my direction. No, I didn't mean to. The funeral's in 3 days. Maybe we should go. She reached over and squeezed my hand. I don't know if I can face Mary, I said, stumbling over my words. Or any of them. My words caught in my throat. There, on the edge of the tree line, stood a familiar figure, dressed in all black, wearing a white mask, splattered with blood. I stood up. Alicia grabbed my hand, but I yanked it away. Get the hell off my property! I screamed. The figure didn't budge. Fueled by alcohol and anger, I leapt off the porch and strode across the backyard. Ben, please don't! Alicia called after me. Take off your fucking mask! I screamed, closing in on the figure. He still didn't move. A man is dead because of your fucking games! Alicia jogged after me, turning on her cell's flashlight. Ben, stop, please! But I didn't stop. I didn't stop until I was inches from his face, but I could smell his sordid breath in the air. Take off your fucking mask, I growled. I want to see who you are before I smash your stupid little head! He just stared at me with those gaping eye sockets, plastic mouth twisted into a smile. Oh, you don't believe me? You should. I killed someone last night, smashed his head right in. I'm a murderer now. You hear that? I leaned in, my face inches from his. I killed someone because of you! And I'll kill you too, if you don't take that fucking mask off! He didn't move. Fine, I shouted, spittle flying from my mouth. I'll take it off myself then. I reached up, grabbed at his jawline, pulled. It didn't come off. I stumbled forward, grabbed harder, pulled harder. No. I took a step back, my heart pounding. It wasn't a mask. I watched in horror as his mirthful grin contorted into an angry scowl. Run! Run! I screamed, taking off across the grass. Alicia followed, screaming her lungs out. I whipped around to see the figure chasing us at full speed across the lawn. I ran as fast as I could. I didn't stop until I was inside the house, closing the door. That's when I realized Alicia had stopped screaming. The backyard was empty. Both of them were gone without a trace, except for Alicia's phone in the grass. The flashlight shined up towards the sky, shimmering and sparkling in the shadows. I haven't seen Alicia since that night. It's been a week. I didn't attend David's funeral, though I suppose I'm now in the same boat as Mary Chandler. Her husband is gone. So is my wife. The police suspect that I killed David on purpose. After all, our playful little rivalry was well known among the neighbors. They also believe I had something to do with Alicia's disappearance and to fill in a motive for me. Rumors are flying that Alicia and David were having an affair. I've been advised not to leave town, so as much as I would love to leave this all behind, I'm stuck here. With my guilt. With my past. I leave you with a warning. The masked man, whatever he is still out there. And so, I beg you, don't trust anyone who wears a mask, who hides their face behind a grotesque facade of plastic. Because it might not be a mask, after all.
I hope you enjoyed The Halloween Mask as written by Blair Daniels and Craig Groshek and performed by Jason Hill. I'd like to thank you personally for listening tonight. If you had a good time as we did, please take a moment to subscribe and hit the bell notification icon here on YouTube to ensure you never miss a new release, and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can also check out our podcast of the same name on iTunes and wherever else podcasts are found, and see our other quality programs at simplyscarypodcast.com. And please consider signing up as a patron at our website, chillingtalesfordarknights.com, to show your support and get all of our content, including our audio archive, dating back to 2012, ad-free. Lastly, thanks again to today's sponsors, Astonishing Legends, for their support of this show. And remember, your support of their program helps us as well. Be sure to listen to the Astonishing Legends podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. There are links to our friends in the video description below. I'm your host, Otis Gyrie, and it's been a pleasure as always. I'm so glad you were able to join us tonight. Tune in again next time when we once again turn off the lights and turn on the dark. Sweet dreams, listener. Sweet dreams.
Chilling tales for dark nights.